Hi, I'm a Libra, and this is my husband, Finn. We are going to do a quick glance into the topic of ethnocentrism as it relates to the context of child protected services today in the United States.
Child protection services and the idea of protecting children has a complex and long history. We're going to break this down into three parts. Before organized protection, pre-1875, the era of non-governmental child protection societies, 1875 to 1962, and the modern era of government-sponsored child protection services, 1962 till the present. A quick Google search will state that early efforts focused on orphanages and foster care, with a growing recognition of child abuse and neglect. Later federal legislation and funding quickly played a larger role in establishing the child welfare system. We will talk briefly about each of these three periods. Starting with pre-1875, in colonial times and early 1800s, children in need were forced into orphanages, typically run by private, religious, or charitable organizations. The concept of formal child protection services as we know it today was largely absent. Criminal prosecution for child abuse existed, but was not a systematic approach.
Chattel slavery from 1619 to 1865. During this time, Black children were forcibly separated from their parents. Separating families has roots from over 400 years ago during slavery. Anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of enslaved children experienced some form of separation. Family separation was used by the state to create fear and maintain the power and control of white supremacy. Enslaved African Americans legally were treated as property. Families were separated through sale and trade. Black parents had no legal rights over their children. White society viewed African cultures and family systems as inferior. The system justified family separation under the racist belief that white slave owners knew how to raise or use Black children better.
The boarding school era lasted from 1868 to the 1960s. And 1875 to 1962 was the rise of child protection societies. The New York Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children was established in 1875. This marked the beginning of organized child protection efforts and saw the growth of private child protection care placements, although screening and monitoring of these families were often lacking. The case of Mary Ellen in 1874, where a young girl whose father was an immigrant from Ireland and mother an immigrant from England was severely abused. Mary's case brought child abuse into the national consciousness and spurred further action. The Children's Bureau, established in 1912, became the first federal agency dedicated to children's welfare.
So the boarding school era occurred from 1868 to the 1960s, and then the adoption era took place in the 1960s, where approximately 357 boarding schools operated across 30 states, both on and off of reservations, housing over 60,000 Native children, and a third of these boarding schools were operated by Christian missionaries as well as members of the federal government. The purpose and intentions of these boarding schools was to forcibly assimilate Native American children, creating cultural genocide. So, being the goal and intention was the slogan was to unalive the Indian and save the man. The children were stripped of their clothing, hair, language, and identity based on the racist belief that indigenous heritage made them uncivilized and unfit for self-determination. Native American children were removed from their families to be re-educated in these boarding schools. Ethnocentrism being the belief that white Christian European American culture was superior to the indigenous ways of life. As the boarding school era was coming to a halt, the development of CP societies started to emerge. Native American children were displaced through adoptions in homes of white Americans.
1962 till today is the time of government-sponsored child protection services. The Social Security Act amendments of 1962 marked a turning point requiring states to provide child welfare services and paving the way for government-funded child protection services. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act of 1974 provided a federal funding for states to develop prevention, identification, and treatment programs. The federal government has continued to play an increasingly important role in funding and shaping the child welfare policies. Today, child protection involves a complex system of government agencies, private organizations, and legal frameworks designed to protect children from abuse and neglect, ensuring their safety and to promote their overall well-being.
So during the 1980s was the war on crack cocaine, and a part of this included racist myths about Black mothers giving birth to crack babies. And despite similar rates of positive drug test results from white counterparts, Black women were almost 10 times more likely than white women to be reported. Black mothers were targeted, labeled as crack moms, and were criminalized. Their children were more likely to be removed and placed into foster care. The child welfare system applied middle-class cultural norms to decide what a good family should look like, disregarding realities of poverty, racism, and systemic neglect in the BIPOC communities. This led to biased judgments about families from different cultural, racial, or socioeconomic backgrounds.
The different colors represent a distinct line. It shows one aspect, how there are cracks in the system. It also shows hidden knowledge, blue being easily accessible information such as a quick Google search, orange representing a deeper dive. This information is not mainstream knowledge or directly taught. If you're not a person of color or have family openly and reliably share their experiences and or understanding of history through their own lives, through their own time, and generational timelines, as in able to sort of follow back family trees, or if you had not gone for higher education, specifically choosing a field where this information is taught, how would you know?
Black and Indigenous children are removed at a much higher rate. It has remained this way throughout U.S. history. Still today, foster care agencies, including counties, states, and private agencies, do lack staff, funding, and foster care providers from the communities and culture of the children in need, which leads to misunderstandings, miscommunication, and decisions that don't reflect cultural competence or respect cultural competence or respect. Ethnocentrism and racism continue to shape child welfare policies and practices. In order to truly support children and families, we must recognize the historical roots and work toward cultural responsiveness and anti-racist systems of care.